Hey guys, Synth Doctor coming back at you here. I know we've had a little bit of a break. Today we're going to do something different, and we will be installing the Kiwi 3P mod for the Jx3p. I am doing this for a friend, so I just figured that I would document the process and show you guys how it's done. So if you get a Kiwi kit, you can do it yourself. I just want to quickly mention that I am no way affiliated with Kiwi Technics, nor did not get this unit for free, nothing like that. I merely just want to help you guys. I believe you have the right to repair, and I think knowledge is power, so the more you can teach, the better. So we're going to get into this pretty quickly. I won't show taking apart the Jx3p. There's already some documentation and whatnot online, and the Kiwi manual pretty thoroughly will cover that. So we'll be dealing with, of course, the panel board, which I had to do some rework over here. Half the bank of buttons weren't working, and this board was very dry as far as solder goes. Most of the joints underneath were cracked, or there was very little solder on the back plane of this board. So for some reason this one didn't come out so well from the factory. I've also rebuilt all three sliders here, which we went over in the last video. And of course this board will be getting the chorus speed mod, which the Kiwi will actually control the speed of the chorus. We'll be adding that. And we'll also be changing out several resistors to remedy a flickering issue that's common with the LEDs and more noticeable with Kiwi mod. And of course underneath my insulation here we have the main board, which will be replacing the Intel 8051 with the new Kiwi microprocessor upgrade. So we'll be going over all of that shortly. Let's get started. Just want to give a quick heads up, guys, that the manual is found online when you go to their website, and absolutely you should be following the instructions on paper, of course, and supplementally following this video. This is my first time doing the mod, so we'll be doing it together. But just a warning that this particular synth has very, very sensitive traces. The main board over here with all of the analog section has it's a dual layer board, and the traces lift extremely easily. I believe we have to desolder 40 pins holding the microprocessor to the board, and if you damage any of these traces, especially topside, it's extremely difficult to repair them. So just a heads up, if you're going to attempt this, make sure that you have proper desoldering equipment like the Hako. You could use a pen sucker, but it's very, very easy to damage these traces, and you got to make sure that each pin is loose before you attempt to lift the CPU out. And I'll show all of this, but just a disclaimer. So guys, we're down at the synth level now. So as you can see, I've already removed the panel board. The instructions document how to do that. It's pretty easy. Just so you know, the jack board has to come out first, and there's 4 screws on the back of the synth that hold the jack board. So once you swing this out of the way, you can gain access to all of these standoffs here, in which you can remove the screws. Of course, I had this out to already do work. It was missing over half the screws, so it was flexing pretty bad, and that's not good. Down here, we have the main board. So you can see we have the Roland IR3109 filter chips. So they laid it out pretty nice here. So each voice is actually labeled, and of course it's tucked underneath the key bed so you can't see. But you have each of your 6 voices in a vertical column here, and it makes it pretty easy to work on. Over here you have the master oscillators for the DCO. Of course you have all of your sample and hold section, and I can see that it looks like this op amp from the factory was not properly soldered. It's amazing this is working, holy cow. We'll have to flip it over and see if Goofy Gus has been in here. But you have all of your demuxes here, and of course the DAC section over here. And the guy we'll be getting out of here is the Intel 8031 or 8051, depending on the synth. The 8051 has built-in mask ROM, meaning that you could store program data in there, but it's not used in this synth. There's an EEPROM down here. So there's 40 pins we'll have to remove, and as you can see, the top of this board, you see how there's dual-sided, so that means that there's traces on top, or dual layer I should say. And underneath on the back side there's also traces. So these lift very, very easily, and this is what we have to be careful with. Let's see if we can get a better shot down here. So that op amp is like not even flush with the board. That's absolutely crazy. I've never seen something like that. It is just flying high. Must be making continuity because the synth was fully working, so we'll take a look and fix that. And I think I see another one half flying over here. So Lord knows what went on at the Roland factory back in the day. Of course you have your power supply over here. I usually completely rebuild these and I replace these voltage regulators, but since this is for a friend and he's trying to keep it simple, we are going to leave that intact today. Usually the Roland supplies do hold up okay. Out of all the synth manufacturers, they really do last a long time. I've even removed these main caps before and tested them, and they actually still read pretty darn well. So yeah, I believe the battery is newer. He said he had that replaced and it retains the memory, so we'll take a look and just double check the voltage and make sure that that's correct. So yeah, let's get this board out of here. Bunch of screws, lots of connectors. As always, use Sharpies, they're your friends. Label them, then let's get them out. Alright guys, so now I'm going to pull the board out. I'd like to grab a little piece of insulation here and very carefully we'll lift the cables out of the way, and the board should come out. We're going to go ahead and flip it on its backside. So now there's two power wires that come from the power supply. This actually is factory. Let me zoom in here. Okay, these guys right here that we need to remove so we can get that board free. So we'll flip her back over. And of course, add some solder. And she's free. So first thing I'm going to do is repair this op amp here that's just not even attached to the circuit board for whatever reason. So I'm going to go ahead and flip this guy over, and I believe we're still in the shot. So first thing we'll do is, of course, add solder before we desolder. Alright guys, so after painstakingly desoldering all 40 pins, you have to be very sure when you do this that you have them loose. So what I like to do is I'll generally put the gun over the pin and I'll start rocking it in a circular motion. I do counterclockwise circles and then I start sucking it up and I lift away. And what you want to do is make sure that when you take like your prod tool here make sure when you push on the pin, it's actually in the middle of the pad, and you want to make sure it's not stuck to either side. So once you do that, the rule of thumb is if it won't go, do not force it, because there are so many little traces here that this will absolutely rip them off and you're going to be in a world of headaches. So I like to use an IC extractor. Okay, and very gently you just want to wiggle, and you'll kind of hear a little bit of cracking. Just very carefully work either side up, and as you can see, we can lift the 8031 away. So now that we've removed this, we're going to install a socket. Alright guys, so now I'm going to take the socket here. I'm going to go ahead and drop this in very carefully. I want to line this guy up and just carefully push down on all sides. Make sure that socket's firmly in place. Okay, so once we do that, I'm going to go ahead and flip the board over very carefully. And what I like to do is tack that socket in place first, and then we can flow the rest of the solder. So let's do a little time lapse. Of course, now we have to clean the flux residue out. Alright, so now very carefully we're going to socket the Kiwi here. So very important, want to make sure that you ground yourself somewhere first before you start poking around, as always. And we're going to very carefully line the pins up here on top of the socket. So now I can feel that all of the pins are lined up, and very gently I'm going to rock it back and forth until we seat it inside the socket. So you want to take your time when you do this. So the next thing we want to do is cut W5 over here. This will allow MIDI to work with Memory Protect on. So W5 is this jumper right over here, right above R1, in line with this top connector here. So the Kiwi instruction manual says we can go ahead and snip this in place. So I'm going to do that off camera right now. And as you see, I went in there with a pair of flush cutters and I snipped both ends. Left a little bit of material there just in case we ever had to add it back for whatever reason to revert the mod. Although I would probably pull the board out and put a new one in. But yeah, that's it. Simple as that. So the next thing we're going to do is remove IC2 over here. So that's this op amp hanging out right here. So we're going to do the core speed mod. So we got to remove this, and we're going to end up sticking a little daughter board down over here, as well as changing some resistors to do the LED mod. So stay tuned. As you can see, the Jx3p does a wonderful job of labeling ICs, so it's real easy when you flip it over to see on the back plane where exactly you're supposed to do your work. Next, while we're in here, we're going to get ready, and we're going to remove 8 resistors to do the optional LED flicker mod. So over here we got 800 ohm resistors, R72, R73. Okay, then over here R77, R78, R79. Hiding back here we have R83. And then finally we have R93 and R94. So again, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And then also, we're going to replace one final resistor with a link. So that is going to be up here, R84. We're going to cut this out and just put a wire straight through there. And now when the resistor is placed, we're going to be fitting these 220 ohm resistors. Like I said, they will be going where we just removed these. And of course, we're going to be putting a link in on R84's position over there. So we'll just end up cutting the legs off of one of the resistors and using that as a link. Alright guys, the synth doctor here has done kind of a shoddy job trying to film with one hand, so he's enlisted help from his lovely assistant to continue in the operation here. So, as you know, these are the 4 panel buttons. So we're going to be installing the chorus speed mod after we just put the resistors in. So the doctor's got the medical grade Q-tip here, and we are going to clean this area with isopropyl alcohol. It's important to get it absolutely spotless because we're going to be sticking the chorus mod board here, and we want it to stay when we put it back together. So now that I got that clean, you can see all the crap that came off of it. I'll go to the other side and make sure the IC2 is clean here. So basically what we're going to do is you have your chorus mod right here, and you're going to remove this. Okay, we're going to fit this into where IC2 was on the board, and we're going to go ahead and use the self-adhesive piece of foam here to stick the board down in here. Okay, so what I'm going to do first is I'm going to fit this in. This is kind of tough here. You got to bend this capacitor quite a ways down according to the instructions, and very carefully, very carefully. It's a pain in the butt to see. Okay, we want to work this down. Perfect. So I have pressed this pin header into IC2's location, and it's a really snug, so we're going to carefully flip the board over and tack this guy in. So of course I always like to do my opposing ends to make sure she stays in place. Okay? Now we can finish the remaining pads. Retouch this guy up here. Okay, make sure we have no bridging between the pins. We don't. So you can go ahead and clean those to get rid of the flux residue. I'm going to do that after the fact off camera. So now we'll go ahead and get our wire out of the way here. And you very carefully want to get in here. So now it's a very tight fit, guys, and if you want you can actually remove these button caps. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that. It's a little pro tip here. You can pull these caps off and give yourself a little more room to finagle the bagel. So we'll go ahead and peel this off, and be careful, you don't want the board, and it's a pretty thick piece of foam, but you don't want anything shorting out on these jumpers underneath. So we'll go ahead and tack this guy in place very carefully right next to this diode here. Okay, so just apply pressure. Usually they say 30 seconds with the adhesive. I'm just putting pressure on top of the connector here and on the corner of the board. Nothing crazy. I think at that point we ain't going anywhere. Okay, now we'll carefully route this around the button cap. And of course, place the caps back on, and now, beautiful. That's how you do it. Alright guys, so now we're going to go ahead and put the main board back in. So we're going to be soldering these wires that come from the power supply back on here. So what we're going to want to do is put them in. And in case you didn't label, oh, dropped the sheets here. In case you didn't label, it's very obvious to tell which side is negative. You can see there's a massive ground plane under here. See this huge silver strip, so you know black has got to go in there. So very carefully and more elegantly than myself, you are going to place these wires back in like so. And then you're going to turn the board around and solder them. So I'm going to go ahead and do this off camera because I need probably 3 hands. Alright, I lied. I actually need no hands. So pretty easy. Go ahead. Don't go crazy because we don't want to burn the insulation of the wires. Just get it to flow. Okay. So now we will flip the board back over. I can drop the medical cover here very carefully. You know, I want to push underneath the key bed assembly with one hand while holding back the connectors. Okay, and now you'll have to line this back up. So usually what I do is I start with the top screw. Now you don't have to go crazy here because I always like to test things before I go ahead and bolt everything back together, if you will. So I like to just pick up a single screw head. Okay, so there's one. Just enough to hold it in place. So maybe we'll do a few. Only because if you have to remove the connectors to pull it out again, you don't want to be pulling up on the board and not have it anchored, because then you'll flex it really bad and you can break things. So I'll do the 2 corners here. I'll do this bottom corner and then right up here, because there's a lot of connectors here and a lot of flexing going on. Okay, so we'll go ahead and we'll plug, again, these are keyed connectors. We'll plug the jack board back in. And complete the rest of the wiring harness here. They all pretty much go in order, but like I said, always label just in case. Never hurts. And last but not least, connecting the keyboard here. Okay, so now we have to go ahead and get the panel board back in, and we'll be running this wire over to pin 4 on IC28, which I look like I just probably buried back and can't get to it, so we'll figure out. Alright guys, so we can get to pin 4. So IC28, you have a group of 3 4051s. Okay, so you count up on this side here, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, I went ahead and tacked a little solder on pin 4. So we're going to very carefully attach this wire here. Now, the manual says you can do it either on the bottom or the top. And usually I would prefer doing it on the back side, but I don't really like these flying mods, if you will, and if I want to remove the panel board in the future to do more servicing, it's much easier for me to just get it out of the way first, rather than have to pull a whole other board out to remove it. So maybe in the future, it would be nice to add a little point, or maybe find another trace to tack it onto rather than the chip. But for now, guys, this is what you do when you run into mods. They're not a factory, obviously, and this is a modification. Alright guys, so we went ahead and I mounted the panel board back in. Okay, so you put all your connectors in, you throw it back up, and then you got to mount the jack board. Okay, so we have the Kiwi mod installed. We have our wire run over to pin 4 of IC28, this lowest 4051, like I said, and we did everything. So now let's do the smoke test, right? As we would. So very carefully, you rest the lip up here. And of course, because they didn't make a lid on this synth, you gotta very carefully lower into place. I would never do this with a PA system, but it's my crappy test speaker, so I don't care. There we go. So we plug her in, power her up, so you'll see the bank lights will flash representing the version. And let's see if we have the factory presets. So we didn't break it. We're doing pretty good so far, I would say so myself. Nice. So now what we got to do is, before we enjoy the synth, we have to recalibrate it, because of course you replace the CPU. And here's the original 8031, I believe I showed you guys. So this of course is going to introduce a little bit of offset with the A to D section. It's normal. I believe that microprocessor has a lot more resolution. So we have to recalibrate, in layman's terms, put the sucker back in tune. So there's more than 4 banks here, and what we want to do is go to the user bank section, just pick C1, and you can hear we have a sawtooth wave. Make sure the chorus is off, which it is. Okay, so now I have learned how to manipulate Kiwi just enough. So we're going to go ahead and press the tape memory button over here. Okay, and it'll start flashing. Then we're going to press the right button under the edit group, and there's a table in the manual that tells you how to edit all the parameters. It's different than how it was originally. So now you have to select bank A, and then we are going to select parameter 10. Now this is DCO mix. So we have our 2 oscillators. You can hear there's some nice natural detuning, but we don't want that, because in this patch the mix is in the middle, the fine tune is centered, and the pitch is supposed to be exactly the same. So we need to tune for what we call in the musical world 0 beat. So now that we're on parameter 10, we're going to move this sensitivity slider all the way down, all the way up, and make sure that I am on parameter 10. There we go. And you can hear I just have oscillator 1. Okay? Now oscillator 2, so you can hear that sharp. So we want to be on 1. Okay? Now when you move the slider, you can see I sweep values here. So all the way up is just DCO 1. Okay, so now we're very carefully going to lift the synth off. Okay, I'm going to make some room here. Now I like to just lean it up on the edge here. It's kind of a sketchy setup, of course. So what you're going to need is a tuner. I got all sorts of tuners. There's a free app you can get on Windows or in Mac, or you can use your DAW. The oscilloscope I find is not super accurate, especially from a musical standpoint. So what I like to do is just get it in tune. So I'll tune the first note, and I know I'll get an actual A here. And then once I set that, and this is pretty darn accurate, I will tune the rest by ear for 0 beat. So we'll unplug the speaker, and I'm gonna patch in a little cable here into the tuner. Now this tuner is nice because then you can just plug your speaker output back in. So I still have my signal. So now I'm gonna hold A, and I could see that I am right on the money there. That's pretty good. So what we're going to do now is bring this down carefully, and now you can see that I'm sharp. So I don't want to use the tuner to actually set DCO 2, okay? I want to use the tuner to make sure that DCO 1 is accurate. And if I go up a few octaves, you can see I'm right on the money. So I am not going to touch this adjustment, and I always touch every adjustment, so this is actually perfect. Also, you want to make sure that your tune pot here is centered. Now, I have one of these trimmer adjustment tools. You can use anything really, a small screwdriver. So we're going to kick this down here. I'm going to turn the tuner off. And what you want to do is put sensitivity in the middle. So now you can hear you got two naturally detuned sawtooth waves. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go on this trimmer over here for DCO2 on this side. I lied. DCO2 is actually on this side. Confusing. This is DCO1. So I'm going to put my trimmer in here. Now, if it's ferrous, when you make an adjustment before it's final, make sure you move your screwdriver away, because that's actually going to react with the circuit over here. So what you're going to do is I'm going to sweep sharp and then flat, and I'm going to keep working back and forth, and you can hear when the two tones stop moving. And if you were watching on an oscilloscope, you would actually see a complex waveform, and it would actually start to settle to be like a pure sawtooth waveform. So let's tune for 0 beat. So here we go. You can hear. So now it's sharp. Getting closer in tune. Now I went a little flat, back it off. So again, see, when I move it away, it reacted. So we got to figure out, I believe I have to go a little more flat. So that's really good, but not up to my standards. So we're gonna push the envelope a little more. You could hear when they're so far on top of each other, that's what you call 0 beat. You actually get phase cancellation. So it'll get to the point where they beat so slowly, you'll notice that the low frequencies will actually disappear, and you can hear this. And you'll only get like the higher harmonic coming on top of it. So you want to really get that sound to almost stand still. And when it's perfect, you're not just going to hear, you'll hear one tone, but it's not going to be a very fat tone. It'll be kind of a thin, nasally sawtooth that has a tiny bit of movement in the upper end. And it's always easier to distinguish beating actually in the higher octaves. So in the manual says to do the second A from the left, but I'm just gonna do a general comparison here. And you can hear that's right on the money. So go ahead and do that, work it out, and that's really the final step of doing the Kiwi. Of course, you can run through and do a full calibration if you like. We're not going to cover that in this video. We're just strictly doing the installation here. So thanks for tuning in, guys.